Finance Property Committee to order. First item is public comment period, and without objection, I know there are some people that are here to talk about one of the items later in the agenda, specifically the Fire Station Road in town of Wausau property. I would like to defer those comments until we take that issue up, if that's okay. Are there any other individuals that would like to comment? Public comments. So, all right. We will then go on to the minutes of the December 8th meeting. Moved by McEwen to approve. Is there a second? Any discussion? Moved by McEwen, second by Fisher, third by Arstead. All those in favor of approval of the minutes will signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, no. That motion carries unanimously. Next, we'll move on to, at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Administrator Leonard for an introduction.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. For those of you committee members, there's a new face, new masked face in the assembly room today. Noor Ali Hassan is with us. She is the new individual within administration that's going to be providing project management resources for us that was discussed in the budget. Today's her second day, so she's well on her way. Brought her up to speed on everything. But she'll be assisting in a number of projects. Most notably, she met with Chair Robinson earlier today to be brought up to speed as much as possible on the broadband work that we're doing, but just wanted to introduce her to you today. Thank you.
She's been in meetings with her in 2 days in a row, and she keeps coming back. So that's a good sign. Welcome. All right, next is the approval of the December 2021 claims and question costs that was distributed to you last week. What are your wishes? Moved by Supervisor Leahy, seconded by Supervisor McEwen. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor of approval of the December 2021 claims and question costs will signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, no. That motion carries unanimously. Intergovernmental budget transfers. They were in your packet. Christy, do you want to highlight anything in there?
Just, there's just a few of them. Any of the ones that have a letter, those are all ADRC. They do not need to be formally approved by this committee. They are approved by the ADRC board. But there's, I believe, one that's a 2021 and a 2022. And those I'm looking for approval on for those. But the ones with all the letters are there just for so that I can memorialize it in the minutes that somebody was able to review those above our level, because we do those budget transfers within for the county and for the ADRC internally. That's all.
Okay. Any questions or motions? Supervisor Fisher.
Motion to approve and accept the interdepartmental budget transfers.
Been moved and to accept and approve. Seconded by McEwen. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That motion carries. Potential sale of excess right-of-way, 1427 Lake Street. Jim, do you want to cue this one up?
Thank you. We've been approached by a potential buyer for this parcel. Mark Thompson from Marathon Technical Service is representing a possible buyer for this parcel. This is a remnant piece of right-of-way which was left over from when the McCleary Bridge was purchased back in about 2002. We purchased this. It was a larger parcel at the time. There was a home on there. If you remember, the old Snake Bridge didn't come out here, so we had to buy land. At that point, it became a remnant piece of land after the construction. At that point, we turned that parcel of land over to the city of Wausau. So currently, that land is in the city of Wausau's name. There is a potential buyer that has a agreement contingent to buy the parcels directly to the east of this. There's 2 parcels that are 0.9 acres for $75,000. He's looking at purchasing those, but he would like to put up a development, slide ahead, which he would also need this far parcel to the west, directly east of County Trunk Highway N. We have taken this to Highway Committee. By statute, we can sell to the adjacent landowner. However, there are 2 adjacent landowners. If you look on the screen, there's a parcel directly to the north. He's the same landowner that owns these parcels to the east, but there's also a small parcel of land right here that connects to this parcel also. This is a separate landowner. So at this point, we are looking at permission just to go ahead with the possible sale. We would like permission to go and get an appraisal done on this and offer to the 2 landowners with a minimum bid, whatever that come out to be. Again, right now, the land directly to the east of this, it appraises out to about $1.91 a square foot. What we're looking at selling as excess right-of-way is approximately 8,900 square feet. So you do the math, I think it's $17,000 or something like that. But again, that's a rough number with direction from the infrastructure. They had suggested that we do get an appraisal before we sell this. So I am just presenting this today, looking at permission to go ahead and sell this. Hopefully we could, if we would sell it at the fair market value, whatever that would be, if we could just take it to infrastructure. I don't know if we need to go through a whole process again, but I guess that's up to this committee to decide.
Again, infrastructure at the early meeting recommended that we proceed with this. It's contingent upon the city making the determination that it's surplus, coming to us, carving out that 30 feet section that we are interested in retaining, and then having appraisal and then offering it to the adjacent property owners. So the issue before us is whether or not we would approve that process and authorize the appraisal for sale or transfer. So is there any discussion? If not, are there any motions? Supervisor Fisher.
At this time, as the request stands, as the request to move forward with getting an appraisal and the allowability of the sale, I would like to make a motion to accept and move forward with allowing for an appraisal and a potential sale.
Is there a second? Second by Arstead. Any other discussion? If not, all those in favor will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That motion carries. All right, next we're going to tax deed properties. Reconsideration of bid acceptance on 234495 Fire Station Road, Wausau. Bid originally accepted on December 8th, 2021. This issue was approved by us subsequent to the meeting. We had material facts brought to us relative to the process. So as chair, I directed staff to stop work on the transfer of the property and the deed to afford us an opportunity to discuss those issues at the committee today. So we did not award the bid based on the information, and it would require action. Technology is wonderful. All right, we're good. So with that, I'm going to defer to Mike Printer, the Corporation Counsel, for an explanation of the options that are available to us.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In the updated packet that was updated today, there is a small, I guess, outline of what the procedure would be for reconsidering the bid acceptance. The process would start with a motion for reconsideration. I kind of outlined in that outline the governing authority for that motion and the requirements for the vote. The first question, if a motion for reconsideration is before you, is whether to reconsider the matter. So the first thing you would be voting on is, do we want to reconsider this? If you do, then the matter is before you as if it was not passed or rejected at the original meeting, which was your previous meeting. If the motion to reconsider fails, then the matter stays as it was previously passed. The motion is debatable. The motion requires, in this case, a majority. If the members who voted with the prevailing side were not notified that this motion was coming up, then it would require 2/3, but that notice was in your agenda, so this would be a majority vote. If the committee does pass the motion to reconsider, again, the original question is before you, which is whether to accept or reject any of the bids that were received on this particular property. In my estimation, there are 3 options on how the committee could proceed. One would be to accept the bid, the high bid that was previously accepted. The second would be to accept one of the other bids that was made. The third would be to consider accepting one of the bids with certain conditions on that acceptance. I think that's within the committee's authority as well. Conditions could include things such as requiring payment of certain fees that are outstanding, requiring the property be cleaned up. I would note for the committee that that type of an agreement, the enforceability of it is, I think, limited. We would have some enforcement options through the health department and its ability to enforce against human health hazards, but once the property is sold, our ability to take back the sale is limited. So if we are to have a sale with conditions, I just wanted to make that note. All of the bids that were received originally, I believe, were above the appraised value, so the committee could accept any of the bids. If the committee is to accept a bid that is not the high bid, the committee would have to approve a statement in writing explaining why the committee didn't accept the high bid. That's a statutory requirement under 7569. So those are, I think, what your options are. Again, the first item would be whether there's a motion to reconsider on the table. If there is, that reconsideration needs to be decided, and then if that is approved, the original motion is before the committee.
So, Kim, correct me when I'm wrong, but this was a piece of property that was delinquent from 2007 until it was taken through tax deed in 2013. The previous owner lived on the property, even though the county took title to it from 2013 to February of last year. In February of last year, Corporation Counsel Corbett entered into a lease agreement with him to allow him to rent the property for $100 a month, and to which he made 5 payments. At the end of there was a moratorium on evictions at that time, and once that moratorium was lifted, the county decided that we would try to sell the property and therefore evicted the previous owner from the property. The property has, if you recall the photos from last month, significant debris and scrap material and other things there, and is in a compromised position as a structure. And I think that there were some concerns in the neighborhood. So what we'd like to do is open up the discussion to potentially evaluate the options. So we would need a motion at this time for reconsideration of the action that we took at the last meeting, and then that would open it up for discussion and potential other actions. So I would ask whether or not there was a motion for reconsideration. Moved by McEwen, seconded by Fisher. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor of reconsideration will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That now puts the issue before us with no recommendation before this body. So for us to move on, we will need to have a motion. At this time, I'd like to call on Mike. If you could identify yourself for the record. If you could come.
My name is Mike Witsling.
If you could grab a microphone.
Thank you. My name is Mike Witsling. I am the neighboring property owner on Fire Station Road. I was the second bidder, the second highest the last time around. The third bidder in the process at that time was the neighbor on the other side. I put in a bid for the property on Fire Station Road, the one between us, because my better half and I would like to acquire the property and clean it up. When last month, when you made a decision and awarded a bid, I felt that a mistake or an error was made in judgment, that it hadn't been looked at for some things according to the ordinance and according to the safety in the area, and I believe that you weren't informed as to how the property looks, as to how it's being maintained, as to what the neighboring community was looking at. So therefore, I made a call to Mr. Robinson, and he was wonderful. Just so you know, John, thank you very much. Very cordial. Felt that I wanted to have a few minutes to let everybody know that there are concerns with things in the neighborhood, property, safety, environment. There have been many concerns over the years. We feel that by awarding the bid, as you did back to the original owner, that you may be developing the same problems, allowing things to continue in the future. It was an issue with paying taxes. You may see more of that. But the question is, what would we do with the property? I want to let you know what our intent is, because I think it has bearing on it. It has a lot of merit. Our intent, owning the neighboring property, would be to purchase this one, to clean it up, to remove the foundation, to remove everything on the property, get it back to an original state. The property that I own, there was a fire there a few years ago, and there is a structure. We would remove that as well. We would be moving forward with putting a home, a residence on there, a few thousand square feet. We would increase property value. We would increase tax revenue. We would clean up for community and neighbors. Our intent going forward would be to make it a nicer area, nicer for the community, safer for everybody, and increase tax revenue for the county. Our intent and direction is to take care of that situation in our little corner of the world. So I thought you needed to know that, and I really appreciate you guys all of you taking a look at this again. I guess I don't know what else to tell you.
With that, Kim, can you give us an update on communications that you've had from the town?
So back when this tax deed, when you all directed me to list this, the first thing that we do when we pursue a tax deed property is we send out a letter to the municipality and to the departments of the county that might have an interest in acquiring the property. And the town of Wausau had originally indicated that they would like to acquire the property, basically because of the condition it was in and the drain it was on the town. When it went to their town board to approve that sale, the town board did vote it down and decided not to pursue acquiring the property. So then we proceeded with listing the property for public sale. Chair Robinson today directed me to get in touch with the town clerk in the town of Wausau. I knew that there were some outstanding obligations that the former property owner had with the town. So John indicated that he would like to know the extent of that. The specials that are outstanding to the town of Wausau are for garbage collection for 2018, 19, and 20. She did not send him a bill for 2021 as she did not know that he was occupying the property in 2021. So his obligation to the town of Wausau right now stands at $576.61. And the town does plan to proceed through whatever means necessary to collect on that obligation.
Okay, so I'm going to try to lay out the options one more time. So under the county ordinance, we're typically required to take the high qualified bid. There are exceptions in the ordinance that allow us to consider other factors. So one option would be for us to honor the high bid and proceed accordingly. A second option would be to reject that bid and go to the second bid. The property appraised at $16,000. All three bids came in excess of that appraised amount. It was the high one of $28,000. Mr. Wisling's bid was $21,622, and then we had a third bid of $21,555. There were outstanding taxes in 2013 of just under $7,400. We have the 576 in garbage collection special assessments from the town. In addition, one of the concerns that I had looking at it, given my background working for the DNR, was the nuisance and potential concerns relative to the conditions on the site. An option could be for us to require that prior to us transferring property, that all special assessments be paid. That he bid the $28,000. He would have to come up with the balance by the 21st of this month. And then we could require that the appropriate county officials negotiate an agreement with him under which he would pay those specials and work on the development of a cleanup plan for the property. As Mike pointed out, the difficulty in us is enforcing that. If we're not the owner, we could use the health department powers to enforce it. So you can accept the original bid, reject it, and go with the next bidder, or condition it. So we throw that out there for discussion. I did have a discussion with Mr. Borse, indicating that we were reconsidering it. In that he may be giving, we may be contacting him relative to a negotiated agreement, but ultimately that decision is up to this committee. Any questions? Supervisor Leahy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess two questions. Is the original property owner someone who lives here locally and manages the property and failed to manage it? And then secondly, do we have any examples in the past, a precedent of attaching those conditions and how successful we've been in managing that?
My understanding is that Mr. Jeffrey Borshi owned the property for 30-plus years. And so he had been, he owned the property until 2013, at which time the county took it through tax deed. He continued to live there until basically last November, December, at which time we enforced the eviction plan in order to allow us to sell the property through tax deed. I'm not aware of any conditions that we've imposed before.
No, Mr. Chair, I'm also not aware of any conditions that we've put on such a sale previously. Again, when I mentioned the limited enforceability, that's just based on how I could see the matter proceeding, but I don't think there's been any precedent with us doing so in the past, as far as I'm aware of.
And again, this is one of those fall through the crack properties that sat there from 2013 until 2000, the end of 2020, when Scott Corbett began to work on a lease agreement with a moratorium, so we could at least recoup some of our costs. So I know that there were concerns on the town's part over those years. The question is, do we take the high bid under the ordinance? Do we condition that high bid, or do we reject the high bid and go to a different one? Those are the options. Any discussion? And we haven't set this precedent before, but I think it's something that we would look to do going forward, given the fact that we don't want this revolving tax deed parcels going out, coming back, and we deal with this again in 4 years. Any questions? I had an opportunity to speak with Chair Gibbs, who couldn't be at the meeting. His comments, and I'm sure he can correct me, but he felt as if the high bid, we should honor the high bid, but put conditions on it because of our responsibility to the taxpayers at the 28,000, but put the conditions in relative to making sure that the town was whole and that we had a cleanup plan in place. But that is a member's position.
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead, Yi.
Just a quick question here. You mentioned that you spoke with the original owner of the location there. Did he indicate in any way that he's intending on honoring or even paying back those, our taxes and on the late fees that's currently on there? Was there any indication at all, or was there any response from the original owner?
Well, we didn't talk specifically about the previous tax delinquency because that's being made up with the bid of $28,000, well in excess of that amount. I think there are, quite honestly, concerns about it, given the fact that it went tax delinquent once, that it may become tax delinquent again. He has come up with the bid required payment as part of the bidding process, but we can't comment. I don't know his financial situation well enough, but I have very strong concerns about the condition of the property. Supervisor Leahy.
Okay, maybe I do have another question. Then if we put conditions on the original bid, then we talk to that person and he has the chance to accept or reject. And then if he rejects, it would all just come back here anyway and we would proceed logically with the next highest, or, okay.
Mike?
That's correct. Would be the procedure. The first step would be he did make the 10% down payment as required for making his bid, but he would need to make the remaining payment to complete his bid. As that would be one of the conditions. The other would be signing whatever agreement was negotiated. If he did not agree to that, then the conditions that this committee approved for sale wouldn't have been met, so it would return to the committee.
Supervisor Leahy.
Okay, so is there a time frame that would be reasonable for cleanup? Is that something that would be put into the agreement? That way we would hopefully appease, the other interested parties and the town that's concerned with potential environmental issues?
Mike?
So when considering this prior to today's meeting, that was something that I was thinking about. If there was ultimately an agreement with conditions, a time certain by which those conditions would need to be met would obviously be a part of that agreement. The issue is then the enforceability. Okay, if conditions are not met by that time, but we've already sold the property, we don't have any recourse. And if we haven't sold the property at that time, then there's been a several month delay in the sale. So there are some pitfalls and potential issues with that. procedure.
Supervisor McEwen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess with the past track record of the previous owner, I would hate to have this go back into tax delinquent status and not clean up the property. I think as far as the option I would prefer would be rejecting the first one and accepting the second offer with the gentleman that, has already told us what he plans on doing, and those could be part of the conditions also. But I have no idea with this previous owner, if he plans on cleaning it up or leaving it the way it is. So, like I said, that's just my thoughts.
So, I can't comment on his financial status. I don't know, but we're here because it went delinquent. He did indicate a willingness to clean up. He indicated that a lot of people brought material in. He stopped that coming in, but it remains, and that's a concern. In our discussions of options earlier today with Kim and Mike and myself, we had talked about trying to, if you were to condition it, set some very arbitrary timelines of February 1st having all of the payments made. And according to the bid documents, he has come up with the remaining 90% by the 21st of the month. I don't know, based on the discussion, that he has done that. And we would look to make sure that the town of Wausau is held harmless relative to the 57661. And then we can enter into an agreement, and that would be something that the health department with Dale Grosskopf and others could enforce should it raise to the nuisance or hazard level. But again, we're treading on some uncharted water with limited enforcement discretion on that last point. So. What are your thoughts?
So, Chair Robinson, quick question.
Go ahead.
So then, effectively, and what was the date of that the final payment would have to be made? What was that date again?
21st.
Of this month? So the way I'm seeing it, just on a very rough math number, effectively right now, as is standing with the $28,000 bid, we would be returning net of the outstanding back tax as well as the lien from the town of Wausau. We would be turning back approximately $20,023 to the taxpayers, versus with the secondary bid on the same factor of the keeping the town whole as the town whole would be returning back to our taxpayers $13,645. So, effectively, roughly at the end of the day, would be returning a little less than $7,000 back to the taxpayer than we would have. Have we sat at the point where we wait to see if this lapses as of the 21st?
Well, right now, we have
Ability to
not
do
made
that?
an award, so I'm not sure. We have a blank page right now, so we don't have an accepted bid. So technically, I don't know how go ahead, Mike.
So at this point, if the committee didn't take a specific action today, there wouldn't be an accepted bid, as Chair Robinson indicated, so that January 21st date goes away. This committee could take an action that somehow leaves that that January 21st date in place. Those actions would include accepting his bid as previously accepted or accepting it with conditions. But if no action is taken, that date doesn't exist anymore.
Jennifer.
So if it doesn't exist, does that mean that 10% that he put down is null and void and we start the whole process over again?
No, I think that those are still valid bids up to a point certain.
Right, I think the committee would need to, at some point, determine whether any or all of those bids are accepted or rejected. Any bids that are rejected, the 10% is returned to them. So if the top bid was rejected, his 10% would be returned to him. The same with any of the other bids. I hope that answers your question.
If, however, if the decision was to award the bid to him and he couldn't come up with the balance of the financing, he would forfeit the initial bid for the 10%. So, in light of the fact that we have taken action, do we have to take action today? How long is this? I'm sensing uncertainty on faces.
I would say that the committee has some tools at its disposal. I think those tools could include delaying final consideration of this until a future meeting. My concern would be if no action is taken on the bids, then again, that January 21st date goes away. If whatever motion is made, for instance, a motion to table this to a date certain, if that motion also included leaving the, I'm just throwing this out there without having formed it previous to my saying it out loud, leaving that bid in place with some way to keep that that January 21st date in place. That's also a potential option that I think would be in order. I just haven't formatted the wording in my head, so I'm sharing that completely off the top of my head.
Supervisor Fisher.
Thank you, Chair. Just some more waxing. I do like the idea that we do have a responsible party that is looking to both clean the property as well as enhance said property by syncing it up with the property next door. So I'm very positive about that. I'm just on the other side of that same coin, though. You know, obviously, if we're going to set a precedent, because obviously at this point we would be changing how we look at all of these bids with the whole giant slew of these properties we have to deal with going into the future. And so with some of the other aspects that we were looking at, some of the other properties previously where, you know, we have to be over a certain amount, we have to be within X number of dollars of the assessment and whatnot. We are over the minimum here with the assessed value, so that's not a consideration. However, it is kind of tough to sit back and change our current precedent knowing that we have quite a number of other properties to deal with in this same fashion. And just my thoughts on that.
Mike, I'm thinking out loud, and so if we, by virtue of us reconsidering it, we've voided the 21st deadline for him, for the coming up with the balance. So we are, you know, Chair Gibbs cannot be with us today. He had asked that we, relative to ARPA, consider having a dedicated meeting to finalizing discussion on ARPA for next week. We had talked originally about having a special meeting between the last meeting and this one, which we didn't do, but he can't be here today. We could give Mike a chance to put his thinking cap on, see if that meeting could happen before the 21st, and deal with that once we have a chance to collect our thoughts and maybe put together some proposals and bring it back at that time. Mike?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think the statement that you led with, I wanted to reemphasize, which is the fact that we've reconsidered this, that right now there's nothing on the table accepting any bids. So the January 21st date that was in place because the bid was accepted at the last meeting would not apply. That date would not be in existence. So when we're thinking about whether we need to take an action before January 21st, I don't know that that's a consideration for the committee because again, that date was contingent on the bid having been accepted at the last meeting, which was now reconsidered today, and that bid is no longer accepted at this time. If that makes sense.
You know, I'm like Supervisor Fisher. Part of me says award it to the high bid with the conditions. The other part said he's not performed historically, and do we go through this again? And so I struggle, and I know we've had staff provide some input, and they're concerned about going through the do loop again. But we can delay it for the purposes of maybe exploring intent of Mr. Borsch and others with a time certain and try to bring him back at the next meeting, or we can act now. Is there a motion in light of there not being a motion? I would is there any objection to placing this on a special committee meeting when we talk about the ARPA funds for next week, if that's what we do? And then we'll give Mike and I a chance to explore options.
If I could add one more thing, Mr. Chair, if, I guess regardless of the action the committee takes, if I could get some direction as staff as far as what additional information you would be looking at from a legal perspective from me, that would be helpful. If you are looking for some additional answers, I would need to know what questions you would like me to look into, so that direction would certainly be helpful to me as well.
Supervisor Leahy.
Perhaps this is something that you could look into, or that's a possibility, but would the town of Wausau be further involved with those conditions? No, it's totally in our hands at this point? Okay.
Any other?
Chair Robinson.
Go ahead.
So, and, please excuse my ignorance on this, but is there anything that we could do at this time to keep that clock ticking?
So I'm just thinking this out on the spot here. If the committee was to accept any of the bids today, including the high bid, I think that would start the clock anew today. So then there would be 45 days from today by which the entire deposit would need to be paid. So the clock kind of extends out from today. So to answer your question, I don't actually think there is an action that could keep that 21st date on the map. We're running into due process and requirements and notice requirements to the bidder, and if we're only accepting the bid today procedurally, that requires the 45 days to kick in from today.
We didn't talk about that before. Supervisor Leahy.
I'm leaning towards accepting the original bid with conditions. I feel like that in itself is already a precedent that we haven't really set before, that we haven't explored before. it would at least, like you said, get the clock going again, and it would allow us to talk to that person, see what his intentions are, see if he'd work with us with these conditions, considering we've given him, 2 technical chances before, I guess, to work with us, and he failed. I guess I do have concerns, though, that scrapping that bid and accepting the next one is more of a change from our original process and just could open up a can of worms of anyone after this coming back to the next meeting and saying, wait, I also want a reconsideration. I also have a plan that I didn't get to talk about at the first. I sent my check in, I didn't get to talk about my plan. And people don't just attend committee meetings for no reason. I get that. They're not a blast. So probably 30 people won't try to do that, but we are opening up that door to allow it. So I'll make a motion to accept the original, the highest bid with conditions that we, I guess, need to get into place.
So let me take a stab at what I think you said. So I move to accept the high bid and direct the appropriate county officials to enter into negotiations with that bidder for the purposes of ensuring payment of the bid amount, special assessments to the town of Wausau, and the development of a cleanup plan with said cleanup to take place no later than July 1st. I just throw that out there for clarification, because that's what we had talked as a potential option about before.
That sounds very official, yes. And then I'm sorry if I'm still not quite understanding this, but he would have to agree to all of that before it technically is his property again? No.
My interpretation of your motion would be that you're accepting the high bid, but that high bid is contingent upon negotiations being concluded and him accepting those conditions. I think, however, if the high bid is accepted and he signs an agreement, then the sale could occur. I don't know that the sale would wait until the conditions are fulfilled.
So, Mike, could the payment provisions be required and the plan be required prior to?
The payment of the special assessments.
Yes, in the development of the plan.
I think if the committee is so moving, to set a date certain by which those assessments are to be paid, that would be the direction I would take to the negotiations.
So you had made the motion. Do you want to perhaps restate your motion, because other people have been restating it for you?
I don't know if I can do that at this point.
Chairman Robinson, do you want to read it as it has been recorded so far?
Sure.
Motion by Leahy. They're waiting for a second. To accept the highest bid from December 8th, 2021, and direct appropriate, county officials to create an agreement that the special assessments to the town of Wausau are paid and filled by a date, and a cleanup plan is agreed to by a date. That's what I've got so far.
Mike?
I just wanted to make a note based on that wording, and thank you, Christy. If we're accepting the bid from December 8th, the January 21st date, I believe, would remain in effect, because if we're accepting the December 8th bid, then the ordinance allows for 45 days from notice, which was already provided after that bid was made. So I think we may have stumbled onto a solution to the issue that we were all trying to figure out. Thank you, Christy.
Jennifer?
Thank you, Chair. So if we, let me think there. So if we go back to where we were, is there?
We don't have a second on that. I just don't want to go ahead if there's no
just
second
thinking.
to this motion.
Oh,
yet.
okay.
Okay.
Can we get for the purposes of discussion, can we get a second to the motion? Second by Fisher. Now, Jennifer.
Thank you.
So if everything falls into play on the 21st, can we put a contingency to clean up prior to the 21st? And have that part of it also?
I don't think so for multiple reasons. I think one, I don't think the cleanup could be accomplished in that time frame. I guess, the more that I'm thinking about this motion, if we leave the 21st date on, so if we're accepting the bid from December 8th, and we're making the sale contingent upon these negotiations being completed, there could be an argument if he does make that remaining payment that the county's bound to the sale, and that we just have to complete the negotiation. So that's something to consider as well.
So we have a motion and a second to accept the high bid from December and to require as a condition of the transfer of the deed, the payment of the specials and the development of a cleanup plan. Craig?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The development of the cleanup plan is what I have an issue with. So the 21st, just say the payment's made, the property is then transferred back to that previous owner. What if they don't clean it up?
I think that's the issue that Mike has been raising. If we could you could put with that said plan to be completed by a date certain is an option, and then you would have an inspection from the health department for a violation of human health hazards. It's limited, the problem is it's a limited stick.
Okay. Yeah, I don't like that limited. Like I said, with his past track record, I don't think that the previous owner is going to be in a hurry to get that property cleaned up. So that's the only problem I have.
So we have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Chair Gibbs, or Chair Evanson, sorry. So at this point then, if this motion were to go through, final payment would be due on the 21st of effectively $25,776.61. That would alleviate the difference between the 10% deposit as well as what is owed to the town of Wausau. Is that correct?
That's my interpretation of the motion, yes.
Any discussion? If not, all those in favor of the motion will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no.
No.
The ayes appear to have it. Close, but the motion is carried.
Thought it was a tie.
I'm sorry?
I said I couldn't tell if it was a tie or.
It was 3-2. I have the advantage of hearing the vote on the phone was aye. All right. and we will track this and monitor it, so we will work with, keep the neighbors, Mike will keep you informed on where we are. Thank you. Next is the bid opening for tax deed property 2933-3. Oh, go ahead.
Can I have like a follow-up from that?
Yes.
whole process? So going forward, do we need to consider more than just the highest bid, especially when it's the original owner? Has that never come up yet before, that we've accepted a highest bid and it was the original owner that already had a strike against them? Okay, because
It's a good question. I come to you with limited experience in this area, so I can't speak to a lot of the historical. I think one of the issues, especially in this particular case, is just how long this property was sitting on the county's. It was in the county's possession, but no action was taken on it. So that is definitely a large contributor to where we are. Our ordinance allows the committee to accept the bid that it determines is most advantageous to the county. The criteria are considering the dollar amount of the bids, the use to which the property is going to be put, whether the property will be subject to real estate taxes, and the best method of proceeding to protect public health, safety, recreation, and welfare of citizens and visitors. Then there's also a statute that indicates that if we don't select the high bid, we have to provide a reasoning in writing, and that's a public record that can be examined in the future. So those are the legal requirements that are in place right now. I know in my brief tenure in this position, the committee has historically accepted the high bid, but that's not required by ordinance. That's more of a practical consideration.
You think this gets complicated? If this had been hypothetically a homestead property taken at tax deed time and we were quick to act on it and transfer the property owner would have been entitled to the difference between the outstanding taxes and what we took, so the difference between the 28,000 and others. But in this case, it's the homestead property owner doing it, and technically he wasn't the homestead property owner anymore because he didn't own it since 2013. So we are trying to deal with these issues through our efforts to deal with tax deeds. Hopefully we don't have many more. I'm afraid there are. So we will give you an update at one of the upcoming meetings, because that was part of our work plan. So we'll ask the treasurer and the clerk and others to update us. Is this? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is Administrator Leonard. I'm going to try to put on my old lawyer hat for just a second. Your ordinance, I mean, we're referring a lot to the ordinance today, and I think that's a good place to start. Your ordinance actually empowers the county clerk to make a lot of the determinations that have been discussed here today, most notably identifying the bid most advantageous to the county. So I appreciate the comments about setting precedent and referring to the ordinance. Perhaps it's a good place for the committee to talk about what are the expectations relative to staff to carry out the will of the board and the will of this committee. Because while your ordinance has directed staff to do a number of things here, historical precedent from this body has been we bring a lot of those things back to this body for action. So perhaps, Mr. Chair, as a suggestion, it might be helpful for the committee to take another look at that ordinance and clarify its intent in terms of staff work versus committee work, for all the reasons you just identified. That, you know, is this body the best body to make a determination, a factual determination relative to the bid most advantageous, or is it something that through the criteria set forth in the ordinance, staff can execute. And then you can exercise an oversight function periodically. Just another piece of food for thought.
All right. We will revisit that issue as part of that discussion coming forward. Bid opening for 2019-3.
This is the same property for which we had a bid last month that you rejected, 2019-3 on North 16th Avenue. And I've received another bid for $1,000, and it does include the 10% bid.
Refresh, what was the bid last month and what's the appraised value?
Well, this was one of those that at the last meeting after we opened the bid, you directed me to get an appraisal for the property. We had it this one has been listed for a long time. So I don't know if the appraisal now that we have received affects the bid that was received. Since your direction to me was to get an appraisal for the property at 1308 North 16th and 1312, which was the property that Habitat for Humanity had returned back to the county, and you directed me to get an appraisal and then talk to the appraiser about combining the properties.
So based on the appraisal, the bid is at best 25% of the appraised value.
Correct. The appraisal is at $4,000. That is not what we had it listed for when this bid came in.
What did we have it listed for?
I would have to look here real quick. I'm sorry. We had it listed for $1,900.
So what are the wishes? Now, that parcel is non-buildable according to the appraisal?
That is correct. There is I spoke with the appraiser yesterday. There is a drainage ditch running right through the middle of the property. The property is wetlands, and it is non-buildable.
What are your wishes? The next item is the appraisal for the two properties and whether we combine them. If they're combined, the second property is buildable?
No, it is not. The
neither are.
appraiser said the city may allow a cement pad to be put down to park a trailer or a four-wheeler on. They would not approve it for a garage, and it is not buildable for a home.
So what are the wishes relative to the bid on 2019-3? Craig?
I'll make a motion to approve or accept the $1,000 bid on that property.
It's been moved to accept the bid on property 2019-3. Is there a second? Second by Fisher. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor of approval of the bid will signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. That motion carries. So we just answered half of the question.
And that pretty much dispenses with the next agenda item as well. Because
So-
if this parcel is sold, we do have an appraisal for the property that was formerly the Habitat for Humanity property. So if you will direct me to do so, I will list that one for sale as well.
Is there a motion to direct staff to list that property for sale? It's been moved by Fisher, seconded by Leahy. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor will signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. That motion carries. Next, we will go to the Conservation and Planning Zoning Department. Staffing restructuring. Oh, was in your packet.
This is Administrator Leonard, and I have the CPZ Director, Lori Miskimmons, is here. She'll give you an overview, and you may or may not hear from me again.
All right.
Can we vote on that?
Okay. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Lance. Okay. Is this, are we displaying up on there at all, or?
Christie, who's in control of the, I think Lance is. I don't,
This doesn't look like it's in the well.
Christie, are you controlling the screen or is Lance controlling the screen?
I don't think I am, but I can open the packet and share, see if that works.
You want to get it up on the screen, and then I believe it starts around page 75 in your packet. There, 74, 75.
Okay.
So we are requesting an immediate restructure to the zoning and regulatory programs. If you look on page 2 of the memo, which I believe is page 76 in your packet, we don't have it up on the, do you have control?
He should put it up in just a minute.
Okay, all right. You'll see the structure as it exists today with our land resources manager, and then we have a zoning specialist, a planning analyst, and 3 planning technicians, and actually about 5 technicians in all under within our zoning and regulatory programs. And so what we are doing is we're asking to create a new structure. It will still contain 8 positions. 7 of those are full-time and 1 is a casual part-time. However, we're asking this committee to approve a resolution to send forward to county board to abolish the C42 planning analyst position and create a B25 zoning specialist position, and also abolish one of our B23 technician positions and create a B25 zoning specialist position. And that illustration is in figure 2 of the memo, which I believe is around page 77 of your packet. So, oh, is it up there now? Thank you. Okay, so again, I was referring first to figure 1, what our structure is now, and then figure 2, which is our proposed new structure. Part of the reason we want to do this is we want to move the zoning administrator title and those high-level responsibilities that come along with that into a management level position within our department. This would make it more consistent with the other duties held by our managers at CPZ. And we also want to create more consistency in creating 3 senior positions within the zoning and regulatory program so that we can align job duties and expectations across the whole program. We also think by this new structure creates advancement opportunities for our department as a whole. Right now, with 3 POUTS technicians, when we get new staff to come in, there's no advancement opportunity for them within the POUTS program. They can only be a technician, so we believe this is contributing to some of our turnover that we're having in the department. So we want to create a new structure where we can show new employees coming into the department that there are advancement opportunities. And so we did run the budget impacts with employee resources. The budget impact is expected to be neutral. We believe if anything would increase with payroll or benefit costs, that our increase in fees that we've been collecting at CPZ over the last 3 years would help us in covering any cost. And the reason we're asking for this now is I've now been in the position for about 7 months, so I've had time to consider how things are working in the department and where we would like to make improvements. And we've also had some recent vacancies that are allowing for us to consider this restructure. You want to speak? Sure. Yeah. Okay.
So you haven't voted not to let me speak, so
Is there a motion?
I'll be really brief. The reason, again, it's here pursuant to your ordinances 4.20 specifically, this committee, after the standing committee, is charged with evaluating any creation, any proposed creation of new positions. So Lori did a nice job explaining the reasons why this is an advantageous restructure from the perspective of conservation planning and zoning. I'd echo those. The one thing I'll say is timing is right here. We have had vacancies, and particularly in those two high-level positions. And as all of you, you've heard me talk about this before, just the nature of the labor market, particularly as it relates to recruiting. I think our costing that is in the document, which shows if you hired everybody at any one of those three levels, which is just a factual inaccuracy, that never is going to happen. You're not going to hire everybody at minimum, midpoint, or maximum. There's a dispersion of that. And right now, we have two vacancies, the two highest level positions within this regulatory side of the department. And it's very difficult to recruit for those positions. And I also want to really emphasize what Lori brought up, that it aligns kind of job duties and expectations within that management level. Otherwise, we're setting up our old system. Our old system was better than what we had before. I'm a big fan of continuous improvement. The restructure of CPZ on the regulatory side, that just took place about a year ago. It was a step forward from what we had before, and this, I think, is an improvement upon that system. The old system, you'll see from figure 1, essentially you have two high-level positions, the zoning administrator and the land resources manager position. And there's a potential for, hey, whose job is the zoning administrator? Which, for those of you in local government, you know, zoning administrator comes with it a great deal of authority and a great deal of responsibility. And this aligns that responsibility level across each of those manager positions within conservation planning and zoning. So I certainly support the restructure that's proposed. The one thing just in terms of being very candid with you, your ordinance, section 4.20, calls for this committee to essentially batch restructures or new position requests in one of three ways. One is in March, the second is in August, and the last is as part of the budget. Now, of course, this didn't make it through the budget. It's also not March and it's not August. So why is it here? And Lori hit on why now we have the vacancies. So in looking at your rules, it is contrary to the ordinance in terms of timing. However, we're bringing it here because I'm asking you to approve it, and I'll be very candid to the board that it is contrary to those times that this committee under your ordinances is charged with looking at those, because it does make a lot of sense right now based on where the department is with vacancies. So with that, we take any questions you might have.
I think I forgot to add too, with the vacancies, we're hoping to fill them for the upcoming construction season, which also makes this the right time to try and get this through now. So.
Supervisor Fisher.
So net in total, this reorganization would make the overall management and operation of the department simpler, more streamlined, and more effective. Is that correct?
Correct.
Obviously, managing both the staff in a department, is hard to lay on a particular month, knowing that obviously the work needs to get done and it needs to get done effectively. So I would be in full support of, although this does not line up exactly with the ordinance, as you said, the iron's hot, you got to strike now. So I'm in full support of moving forward with this reorganization.
Was that a motion?
Yes.
Who's our second? Moved by Fisher, seconded by McEwen. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor will signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. That motion carries unanimously. Next, discussion of criteria, process, and timelines and distribution of the American Rescue Plan Act funding. So I'll call on Administrator Leonard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know we haven't ever talked about ARPA before. So I did want to, in all honesty, we've been doing some work. I had some conversations with Chair Robinson about trying to put on paper what your conversations have really centered around in terms of an ARPA application, and I apologize, I didn't get this in the packet. We were just able to actually get this put together just about a couple hours ago, but I will send it out to everyone. Essentially, like I said, it really tries to get at a couple of key features. One, we're asking that all applicants utilize the same consistent form. And you'll see that the first real substantive thing we're asking for is, as Christy has alluded to a great many times, is our obligation of reporting. We want individual applicants to identify the eligible use category under the American Rescue Plan Act for their expense. We also have attached on page 4 and 5 of the application, and it's up on your screen, but again, I apologize, we didn't get this in the packet. It references that Treasury interim final rule appendix document that has each of those subsections called out. Again, trying to make sure that we follow through with our reporting. The next piece that you'll see in the document, we ask for a general description of the project, costing information, information relative to the time frame for implementation. Then based on the feedback we heard from you about the idea that we want to make sure that our ARPA funds are utilized to the greatest benefit of the Marathon County taxpayer, Marathon County residents, we wanted to make sure that we at least asked these applicants whether or not there were other funding opportunities that were available from other organizations or municipalities, or whether there were other ARPA-related funding opportunities such as grants available through the state of Wisconsin or federal ARPA funding options, and the timeline for the award of those funds. To get at the idea of limiting the ongoing liability for the county as a result of any use of ARPA funds, we ask questions around potential ongoing costs that may be incurred from carrying out the project, such as building maintenance, replacement costs, or ongoing maintenance or cleaning. We then also tried to get at this idea of return on investment through a series of questions that are in the middle of the document, namely whether there would be savings in any county department or the general community. We asked for the question of whether the project itself has the potential to increase future revenue for the county in general. And then we also ask whether it has the potential for future revenues for a specific county department or Marathon County government, such as increased sales tax, or if a project was aimed at, for example, an expansion, and I've used this example in the past, an expansion of campsites at the Dells of the Eau Claire, for example, that might lead to increased direct revenues for the county. So we asked several questions relative to return on investment. And then finally, again, just to clarify the overall project, we tried to get at, is there a potential that an individual project application, if it were funded, that it would reduce a current county need to deliver a program or a service? Because again, that might be something of value ultimately to the county board in approving projects. In terms of process, this document envisions applications coming into administration for review of those criteria. The idea that if it's from outside of a county, an existing county government department, that I had the opportunity to send that to a department head for further examination. And I would make a recommendation to this committee with comments for me to elaborate on the project itself and my reasons for moving it forward. And ultimately, the opportunity for this committee to consider the total amount of ARPA funding that it would recommend, and comments that the committee could put together for the county board. Now, again, this isn't here for action today. This is simply on your agenda, and speaking with Chair Robinson, wanted to have the opportunity to speak generally about the criteria that we put in place. I will be sure to get this application out to you via email, and we'll put it in the packet in the very near future. and you'll have due time to consider it before your next meeting. The other two, and I don't know if, Mr. Chair, if you wanted anything else there, we could go right into the next two.
Why don't you
projects.
go in and then we'll have a general discussion.
Sure. So then the next item is consideration of the Community Partners Campus project. I'll be very brief. Many of you have heard of the Community Partners Campus project in the city of Wausau. The general idea is to co-locate nonprofit entities at a single location to make delivery of service for those in need more efficient and more effective. The group that is leading that effort has acquired a building just down the street from the courthouse, and they have had conversations with several government entities, namely North Central Healthcare, Marathon County, I also understand the city of Wausau, regarding having government services, government staff housed at that location. Generally speaking, the process that group is utilizing is they're purchasing the building, they're remodeling the building, and then they're leasing portions of the building to those various nonprofits at below market rent to facilitate their sustainable location within the Community Partners Campus. They have offered a space to Marathon County, and they are allowing us to speak with them about modifications of that lease. The general lease is a 10-year term with a prohibition on subleasing. In conversations, email communications with leadership from the CPC, they are certainly amenable to modifying that for us. The 550 square feet that is noted in the drawing, and you'll see just who we would be next to, Mobile Meals as well as North Central Community Action Program. They have 550 square feet that they're offering to lease to Marathon County. Again, the general term is 10 years, however, they were amenable to modification of that term. The cost, the annual cost to lease that space is $4,250. So certainly not an exorbitant amount of money. But in my initial review of that, I do believe it would qualify for utilization of ARPA funding. Again, we're not really, based on the fact that you're looking to have a special meeting, not looking for action on that today. If you do have additional information and additional questions after reviewing the information in the packet and learning more about the Community Partners Campus, I certainly can get that information before your next meeting next week. Anything else, Mr. Chair, on that?
No.
And then the last ARPA project, you've heard this referenced before, and for those of you that attended the Wisconsin Counties Association conference last year, 2021, the Uniquely Wisconsin Tourism Campaign. That's a partnership between the Wisconsin Counties Association as well as Discover Wisconsin. The specifics of that program are set forth in the attachments. The cost to participate in the program fully is $60,000. Several counties I'm aware of have already signed on: Washington County, Rock County, La Crosse County, Portage. Those are the ones I'm sure of, and I'm sure I'm missing one.
Sheboygan? Did you say? I think you said Sheboygan. Yeah.
I can get additional information from County Executive Showman from Washington County on who else has signed on. But that's a $60,000 overall project cost. I've had conversations with the Convention and Visitors Bureau, the new Executive Director, Tim White, regarding the opportunity to partner in that project and the potential pledge of funds by the local Visitors Bureau. He's indicated that he can pledge $10,000 at this time. However, we're still in conversations to see if additional funding can be pledged from the Visitors Bureau. But again, an opportunity for use of ARPA funding that you can consider at your next meeting. So I know I went through each of those very quickly, and there's information in your packet. If you do have additional questions or concerns and want me to get additional information for your next meeting, I'd be happy to do so.
And again, at the request of Chair Gibbs, who he'd like to be here for part of the discussion, I think we need to talk through at that meeting, again, the criteria, the application processes, and the timelines and the allocation. And I'd like to point out that the Department of Treasury just released the final guidance for the ARPA rules effective April 1st. We can use those now going forward, but also if we make a decision based upon the current rules between now and that April 1st, they'll honor it. I know that Van Briesen Law Firm is in the process of updating memos explaining how those uses are, and I think we're looking for, as I sat through a presentation from the Department of Treasury yesterday, going over there's greater flexibility. One of those areas is that it allows a default value or a standard deduction, if you will, approach to lost revenue or revenue loss of $10 million per county. You don't have to prove it, and you can go forward, but I think that we would all benefit from having a little bit more information. So at the next meeting, when we meet, we'll talk, again, we'll go back and revisit what we had talked about in terms of the process. We'll look at the method for accessing, which was laid out. Sarah and Lance worked on that. And then we would begin to look at how are we going to bring certain projects before the county board, sort of the issue that Supervisor Dickinson had raised at the county board level. So I think what we need to do is, again, reaffirm our commitment to timelines, process, and application process, and then discuss whether or not these merit. And I know that the administrator is looking at a couple of other items that potentially could be brought forth at that time. But if you're comfortable with that, we would need to pick a date. And the thought was that if we could do this next week, we could then do a presentation to the county board at either their educational or voting meeting the following week. So I'd ask you to maybe open your calendars for next week, and maybe we'll wait for that discussion for Supervisor Fisher to come back in. So you were going to...
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The one other piece I'd offer today, and Chair Robinson referenced that there are other projects that potentially could be considered at that upcoming meeting. The one project that I will certainly have completed by that time, in addition to any additional information you need on the Community Partner Campus and the Uniquely Wisconsin program, is an ARPA application to utilize funds to essentially alleviate a potential service delivery issue we have. Namely, during the pandemic, we had a number of staff that our leave balances across our organization increased significantly. And to ensure that we're able to continue to deliver services across our organization to the people of Marathon County, my inclination is to offer the opportunity, a one-time opportunity, to buy down, a voluntary buy down of those leave balances to for a defined number of hours. So for example, in 80 hours that staff could agree to offer to the county, we would buy those down to ensure, again, that we do not have service level issues. And I'll bring additional details to your next meeting, but simply put, it's approximately 25,000 hours is the amount that our leave balances increased during the pandemic. So if you think about that in terms of full-time staff, I believe that's about 13 individuals, full-time individuals across the organization that we would be down if people simply took the leave that accrued over previous averages. But I'll bring additional details to your next meeting. But that is the third project that will be at your future meeting, in addition to the Community Partner Campus and the Uniquely Wisconsin program.
So are there any questions today? We've got a process, so I assume Jonathan's coming back? Why don't we, are there any other questions, Craig? Yeah, we'll wait for Jonathan to come back and then we'll set the date. And do you have access to Kurt's schedule? Okay. All right, with that, and if there are no questions, we'll move on to proposed financing schedule. Series 2022 V1 for 2022 Capital Improvement Plan. Christie?
Okay, one of the other things that you may want to consider at your meeting too is we have a 2022 CIP. I'm just scrolling to that page. Of which there's about $23.6 million is for borrowing. Now, we have a good problem and a bad problem. The good problem is that the federal infrastructure plan has been passed. Some of the projects may or may not be ARPA qualified that are in that borrowing list. So we have other options. We have flexibility in this year when we do our capital improvements to pay for them with borrowed funds. You've approved them as borrowed funds at this time. But we do have some flexibility that was not available or known to us in November of 2021 when you originally passed this budget. Therefore, I am going to work with the facilities and all the other stakeholders that have projects that will borrow for, but we need to make sure there is no other funding source that is available or that we wish to use in order to do those projects. If not, I can then size the borrowing to borrow the money and get those projects rolling. We anticipate using two borrowings. One would be for 2022 Marathon County CIP as approved. The other is the continuation of the North Central Healthcare Campus remodel reconstruction. So that's the problem I have. I put together a very tentative timeline based on
Christie,
needing
excuse
to
me,
know what actual.
Christie, excuse me, Craig, before you leave, what day would you be available? Okay. Okay. Go ahead, Christie.
So, the biggest problem I have is that I need to know from the people that have the projects on the plan whether or not they, A, have the right amount for the project to get completed, two, if there's any other funding source that we will pursue prior to having that bond issue finalized. And so that's what your tentative timeline is. So I would need those departments to undertake that and probably get back to us by the third week of February. One promising note is that the 2022 borrowed projects that were approved by the county board in November for this year, I did have bond counsel review all of them, and I have a thumbs up that they all meet the public need, and that there's no private activity that would get in the way of us doing that borrowing. So that I do know. So I'm just bringing this up to your attention that I'm going to need to have through your ARPA meeting, possibly this month, and through the departments that have projects. I'm going to need to know by the middle of February whether there is an alternate funding source than borrowing that could handle or was more likely to be used than borrowing for these projects, and the actual final cost. So that's kind of an FYI for today. But if everything going the way it should, this is what we're looking at as far as getting the sale, the initial resolution, the sale resolution, and the award resolutions together. And remember that you already have the initial resolution for the healthcare center, so that one doesn't need to, that just needs your sale and award. This is really timetable established for the 2022 CIP projects. And that's what I have for you today on that.
Thank you for, this is a timeline, so I imagine that as we get closer to that date, you'll clarify the amounts that we're looking at in light of the discussion we just had. So, any questions? Any questions? If not, we'll go back to the next meeting date. Craig said he was available Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. I prefer not Monday because of the Martin Luther King Day. I think that the county staff are committed to the day in. or the learning day. So what are your, Tuesday or Wednesday work for me at 3:30? Do they work for you? Yi, are you on?
Tuesday works for, yes, Tuesday works for me, Wednesday does not.
So let's plan for Tuesday, the 18th. And we'll focus in on ARPA-related activities at that time. 3:30? Does that work?
Works for me.
The 18th at 3:30. And is Kurt free? And are we free in here? All right, so we will do it in this room at 3:30 on Tuesday. Anything else to come before us? Any announcements? We just announced another meeting. And we will look at that meeting. If we get through the ARPA, there's a chance that we may cancel the meeting on the 25th. I will consult with staff to see where they are with some of the other work. We have to do a check-in. Jonathan, we were looking at the 18th at 3:30 for a special meeting. Would that work for you?
Give me 1 second. That should work.
Thank you. All right, we are set. Is there anything else coming before us? If not, a motion to adjourn. Moved by Arstead, seconded by Leahy. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? That motion carries. We are adjourned. Thank you all. You know, I hate to, I look out there and I see CR Bill.